and welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast. I'm Sarah Hanan, and I am sitting in for your regular hosts today. Lisa Fine and Hima Lomax are taking a little time off, which is awesome because that means that I, as a compliance-adjacent person, get to interview another compliance-adjacent person. Joining me here today is Amy Hanan. Amy is the Chief Marketing Officer for LRN. And before we go any further, before we dive in, let me just say, for full transparency, as you know, CCI is the sponsor of this podcast, and LRN has an advertising relationship with us. However, we are not here today to talk about LRN. We're going to talk about Amy and about the twists and turns that her career path has taken and maybe a thing or two that she's learned along the way. Amy, thanks for joining me. Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you today.
In particular, thank you for making time for me. I know how busy you are. Whenever you and I talk, you've always just gotten off a plane or you're about to get on a plane. How many business trips have you taken this year? How many days of travel? Just tell us that so that we can all inwardly groan at your schedule.
I don't know the exact number of business days off the top of my head, but total number of trips, I would say probably 9 already or 10.
And mostly overseas, right? You're not going to like Cleveland and Indiana so much. You're flying far.
It primarily Europe, a couple of trips over into Asia. And there's been a couple in the US as well so far this year. I'm throwing in a couple of personal trips into that total number as well.
Good. Balance is so important. And I know balance is, it's a challenge for all of us. I know that you surely struggle with it as well. But speaking of challenges, all right, when it comes to marketing people, it seems like we're always doing our work behind the curtain, right? I mean, you're setting strategy, you're executing campaigns, but maybe you're not out in front leading the conversation. But you, especially lately, you're the exception. And I say this because I was scrolling through LinkedIn just the other day, and it was just a couple of weeks ago. And here was a picture of you behind a microphone being the keynote speaker at the headline session at an International Compliance Association event. It was like a financial services summit.
Yes, their Future of FinCrime and Compliance Summit. That was in May in London.
Okay, well, I don't really want to talk about FinCrime, but I want to talk about how you have grown into that role. Was that a challenge to, after maybe operating behind the curtain, as I said, typically, to suddenly find yourself up there as the speaker? What was that like?
So that was the first time that I have delivered a keynote presentation for a conference or an event not run by the company that I work at. Right, not an internal corporate event, but rather, an external event. I have spoken on panels before or have led roundtable discussions, right? Smaller format external events in a way, but first time doing a keynote session where I'm standing up by myself in front of a room of 350 people.
All of them naked, because that's
I did not do that tip, but it was also simultaneously live streamed. I don't even know how many people were watching at the time, and most definitely had butterflies in my stomach getting up on that stage by myself. But I felt like I knew the material, and it was material that I felt really passionate about, was interesting to me. And because it was of particular interest to me, once you get going, get those first couple of points out, then it just feels a lot more natural. You're just going and having some slides and visuals to be able to point to, direct people's attention to the charts and graphs instead of, me standing up there is always helpful as well. But it was definitely a milestone moment for me, right, in my career. Check that box. It was a first time. And now I can say that I am a keynote speaker in addition to everything else.
Was it a list?
It wasn't, I can't say it was on my bucket list. It was not top of mind for me, but it was an opportunity that came up within the organization, and we didn't have necessarily another person at LRN who was available to step into that role. And so I raised my hand and said, I'll do that. I'll do that too.
Okay, raising your hand, that's a pattern with you. I know this because when we had our pre-talk yesterday, you mentioned a time when you were working with a marketing agency and a question was asked and the room responded with silence, except for you. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so this was also a previous organization, media company, and we were implementing for the first time a new piece of technology. It was a marketing automation platform. And this is 2012, 2013, about that time. So still most definitely in the early adopter phase of these newer marketing platform technologies that were starting to become available. I was in a marketing department of about 20 people when this new initiative was being rolled out, and the executive team was looking for a volunteer to lead the implementation and help establish what the strategy was going to be moving forward for leveraging the technology across the organization. Yeah, nobody raised their hand. Nobody was interested. Or maybe people were intimidated.
Ah, but
Maybe
that
they
was
didn't
your
have it.
sign from the universe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And so I was looking around the room, nobody else raised their hand. So I did. I said, yeah, I'll do that.
And that was not a mistake, was it, in retrospect?
Was not. It was most definitely a pivot point in my career. It absolutely changed the trajectory that I was on, when I reflect back on all the subsequent, roles that I've had and moves that I was able to make. Volunteering for that particular project put me on a completely different path than I would have
Gave
been
you a
on.
chance to develop a new side of yourself professionally, didn't it?
There was no marketing role called marketing operations
Mm.
at that time. It was too early on. People were still figuring out what to do with these kinds of tools, where they should be living inside of organizations, what stakeholder group need to have regular input or oversight of these tools. And but it's not to say that I didn't have exposure to other types of tools that were out there or pieces of technology at the time. Email deployment tools and starting to get a little bit of automation just on the email side definitely existed. I had already worked on several projects on building corporate websites and using platforms at that time like Drupal and WordPress. There's other things that are out there, but marketing automation platforms are really looking to bring so many of these different disparate tools together under one system. And then, as you mentioned, all the data and the analytics, the metrics, the tracking that you get from marketing automation platform, that most definitely was new at that time. Being able to bring all of that measurement
Right.
in a single system, and that was a bit of a learning curve.
Would you say that marketing automation platforms are in a way a parallel, not a precursor necessarily, but a parallel to the kinds of software that compliance professionals use these days to manage data? Because it would seem that you have some unique insight into what challenges that compliance pros have in learning the technology and finding ways to extract value from it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you kind of ask this question because I see so many parallels in the way marketing organizations, departments, teams are managed today and what the experience of ethics and compliance teams are. In that, in a lot of ways, on the technology side, on the data and the analytics side, and figuring out how to measure what's effective, what's working, what's not working. In my view, it feels like E&C teams are where marketing teams were about 7, 8 years ago
Okay.
in the availability of the kinds of like tools and measurement and data, and how do we establish data framework that is going to answer like the business impact questions that we have and be able to help move our particular function out of being considered a cost center and into being a value creator for the business, right? This was a whole marketing evolution for the last 10 years. Marketing was always considered the place where you just throw dollars away.
And hope for the best.
It was a cost center, right? And there was a whole shift that has happened over the last 10 years, really driven by the availability of new tools and technology uh, to show that marketing provides so much more value back into the organization, and it is seen as a value creation center, a revenue center, a relationship and community center. Uh, and I see, so, like I said, so many parallels with E&C teams trying to make that transition as well. It's not E&C is not a business hinderer. They are a business enabler.
Exactly.
How do you start using the data and the analytics and measurement to help tell that story? It's kind of early days, I think, still for E&C team. But if they're on the same path that marketing has been on, it is so exciting. It's so exciting to be a part of that and to help have those conversations and shape some of that and learn from some of these up and coming professionals as well, how they're thinking about measurement and business impact that can be completely different to the way that I would think about it on the marketing side.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, speaking of learning and technology or marketing platforms aside, how have you grown in your knowledge of compliance and ethics? I know that your background is not in legal. We'll talk about your background some more. But really, how have you availed yourself of the knowledge that you need about compliance and ethics in order to be effective in your role?
I know you kind of position the both of us as being ethics and compliance adjacent, which is fine. I accept that
You can
position.
take the soup.
Uh, but I also feel legal adjacent. I'm not a trained lawyer. I didn't go to law school. I'm not trained specifically in ethics and compliance either, but I spent quite a number of years in legal marketing broadly. I worked at a business to business media company where they publish magazines, newspapers, websites, all tailored to the legal industry and, reporting on news and trends and data happenings across the legal industry all over the world, and learned so much while I was there. What matters to general's counsel versus managing partners at law firms. What are the new regulatory framework and legislative acts that are coming down that are going to significantly change consideration for those two audiences? How can we position our media services and products and offerings in light of all of those concerns and trends and changes? And the benefit of working at a media company is that you have access to tons of information and data firsthand. And I read a lot. I consume a lot of information in a whole variety of formats, listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of research reports and thought leadership from others in the industry. I'll add also, I attend a lot of events, conferences, trade shows, association meetings, and roundtables. Being able to hear those types of conversations firsthand, incredibly valuable. As much information as you can take in. It all is all like processing in the background at all times for me. But it really comes from being curious. Curious about what's going on and wanting to understand the why and the motivations and why is this particular thing important over another for somebody when they're thinking about their own role and how they contribute to their own organization. Constantly wanting to answer and understand that why is what's sort of, driven me to keep learning more. But it's also, for me, ethics and compliance, I describe it also as being legal adjacent, but if you put it all together. The average person that I speak to, right, when they ask me what I do or what kind of company I work for, or what kind of industry I'm in, When I tell them it's, broadly legal or if it's ethics and compliance, it's you see the look on people's face,
Oh, yes.
not one of excitement.
No.
People think that it's a boring
That it's
subject.
dry, right?
Yeah. Or it's a boring subject or topic. I've never felt that way. I've never felt that way. And it might be because of my media background, even before I joined the B2B media company that specialized in the legal industry. I had a media background that was even broader in scope, uh, right, in the type of coverage.
You worked
Uh,
for the
Right?
Associated Press
Yes, yes.
in the pre-internet days, early internet days, and talk
Early
about
internet
being
days.
early adopter. You were in media before the internet, before
The dawn of uh, people being absolutely consumed by by the internet. Yes.
but I recall you telling me that even that was not your goal either. You did not start out wanting to follow specifically a media path. And you made the point a moment ago that you had not been to law school and you don't have a marketing degree either, which I think is really interesting and exciting. Your major was in
English literature with a minor in creative writing. Before I talk about any of that, uh, just like my point about like how interesting law is, I came into it. It wasn't intentional. I think it is fascinating. It is fascinating. It is absolutely the underpinning of any civilized society. Impacts and influences and guides so much of our day-to-day lives, no matter who you are and what kind of job you have. I get the privilege of working at a company where I get to think about these things all the time. And how does it directly impact the way businesses operate, the way culture is defined, the way we create ultimately, sustainable economies in the world. And I think it is fascinating, fascinating. And it is so intellectually challenging, rigorous to wrap your head around everything that could be happening across every jurisdiction that you might be operating in or that your clients and prospects are, right? Trying to stay informed at that level and really understand the impact on the drivers. I find it so interesting. And I know that I'm not even close to being an expert, not even close. But I love consuming all the information around this and finding those connection points and understanding the interdependency and then how it actually influences people on a day-to-day basis.
not a lot of people, not enough people can say that they spend their entire workday in their happy place. And it sounds like you do.
Mhm.
There are
There-
other to your job, though. I mean, obviously, besides steeping yourself in a subject matter that you are passionate about, you lead a team. You do have a lot of operational responsibilities. And my sense is that you're really wildly well suited to do this. And I have this anecdote, and it's just a small one, but this was meaningful to me. I learned a lot about you and from you in one of our earliest meetings. You had assembled some of your direct reports. You were on the Zoom call as well. It was early in a campaign that we were doing for you, and decisions needed to be made. And the purpose of the call was to, get some info from me and whatnot. And someone on your team said something like, okay, we'll take what you've said and we'll go back and we'll have some internal conversations and we'll turn it over and think about it and then we'll get back to you. And you cut in, you're nodding your head, you may remember this. You cut in, you said, no, this meeting is about making decisions. We're going to decide right now. And that's exactly what happened. And as someone who also leads a team, albeit a much, much smaller one, I was really impressed by that. That style of leadership, that confidence, being direct, moving things forward. I was impressed by that. Where does that come from? Where does your particular leadership style come from?
That's a great question. And I can't say that I've always intentionally curated a particular style, right? Some
Okay.
of it is innate for sure, right? Like you lean into some of your own preferences and what feels comfortable to you in some ways, right? When you're communicating with your team, with your peers, with even people that are higher up in the organization than you or external from the organization. But you also referenced how much we're trying to get done at any one time, right? We're busy. And I can't tolerate the delay of decision making within my team, or the extra buying of time. I cannot tolerate the extra buying of time when it most definitely can be done now. We have so many projects and initiatives and tasks that just need to be done on a daily basis. Uh, I want to most definitely instill in my team, and especially people that are earlier on in their careers on my team, that bias towards action is actually preferable in most cases than analysis paralysis and delayed decision making. And please let me get uh, as many conversations going internally with so many different stakeholders as possible. And I need a committee upon a committee upon a committee to get to a decision where we can do it in the moment. We can do it in the moment.
Does that
And
style of operating apply in your personal life? And I ask this because I know, for instance, you're a single mom and you
mhm,
travel and you have a very demanding career, which means the way you perceive time, the way you manage time, the way you harness it, really important.
yes, the short answer is yes. Yes, I do the same, same
Why
thing
waste time
with
going into detail? We don't have time for that.
I do the same thing in my personal life around decision making that I do in a business context as well. And but it goes back to, being curious and wanting to understand the why and taking in all as much information along the way as possible, so that when you're called upon to make that decision, it is informed.
You're
It is
ready.
an informed decision. I'm pulling from all the other information that I've collected along the way. I've already asked a lot of questions. And then you have to have some confidence and own that decision a little bit in the moment. It's not that all the decisions are going to be right, but then also recognizing when it's not working, or if it was the wrong decision, or it led to an unintentional outcome. That's okay too. Let's just say, that's what happened, and now we can make a different decision for how we're going to go forward. But delaying any action is what I find intolerable. It's giving people the space to make a mistake, and that mistakes are okay. Mistakes are actually an expected part of the process.
Well, yeah, and it can be absolutely, I mean, a constructive force for change, an opportunity to grow, to learn,
Yes.
depending on how you handle it.
Yes.
Talking about mistakes, what are some mistakes you have learned from? What are some things, some areas where you have seen tremendous personal or professional growth due to maybe a lesson you learned the hard way?
hmm so I've made just brings to mind a couple of instances right away, uh, and uh, one was a much easier course correction than the other. The first that jumps to mind right away, and it feels kind of smaller now in hindsight than it did at the time.
That's
Uh,
probably healthy.
yeah. But at the time, it was when I was at the Associated Press, actually, and we were preparing for a really big trade show. This trade show was the largest presence that we would have at any show during the year. And we would take about 5 days to construct our booth on the trade show floor. That's how big it was. All these different kiosks, and it was basically a 2-story house that we built inside this convention center. And we need all these graphics and wrappers and all the design elements around it. I had spent all this time designing, working with our creative team, designing the whole experience and the present, and was leaning into some new brand guidelines that had just rolled out, and it was a whole new look and feel. We were so excited, me and the creative team. about to go to print, and a couple of the business leaders basically hated it. Hated it.
Ouch.
And I kind of dug my heels in and said, we don't, there's not enough time to redesign and get to print and have everything delivered on time. This matches the guidelines, it adheres. There is no business justification other than your own personal preference as to why
This
we.
is what you told your business leaders. Basically, you'll eat it and you'll like it.
Yes,
Right.
I'm paraphrasing.
And how that
Yeah, not good. They didn't
Oh.
like it. They didn't like that. And they went away. They ended up speaking to my VP. The VP comes back to me the next day. Oh, so you will be changing all of that.
All right, message received.
Great. And on top of it, you have some relationship repair to do with these business leaders. So you also need to work on that.
Okay, and you internalized that? You worked on that?
Yes. Yes. Immediately called the business leaders. That I received some feedback. I'd like to press the reset button here to ensure that we're aligned and we're on the same page. We're both working towards a common goal, and perhaps I can take in some more input from you to ensure that the experience of what the show is going to be like when everybody is on the ground is better, meeting your expectations. So
That's
let's
a
talk
skill
about
we
that a
have
little
to
bit.
have, isn't it? The ability to swallow our pride when we need to step back, take a look at the big picture and redirect.
Yeah, and then it was also like something I learned from that quote unquote mistake
Mm.
is not to feel so emotionally attached to or deliverable or output. I was so in love with how the creative looked, right? That I kind of lost sight of who I was working in service of and got so attached to that thing that I just couldn't process somebody else not liking it too. Yeah.
But it sounds like you really dust yourself off and move on. You addressed it quickly and in the moment, learned from it, and moved on. It doesn't sound like it became something that held you back or changed the way you view yourself. You didn't internalize it in a negative way.
Not at all. Not at all. Anybody who's worked, in events, conferences, trade shows, it's happening. That's a hard deadline. I don't control that. We got to show up. We got to show up with a booth and graphics and a whole experience, whether or not, it's what I want it to look like or not. We had to be there and there were deadlines that had to be met. They are immovable. So no time to, cry into my coffee cup that day. It's time to, do plan B and get it done.
And though we do, I mean, I think just as humans in the workplace and out of it, we do have to have time to repair, to recharge our batteries, to get ready to go back into battle, however it is you view your workday. Do you get that time? And if you do, how do you spend it? How do you nurture yourself?
Yes. Uh, it's changed over the years how I de-stress, how I make more space for myself. One thing in the last few years in particular that has been helpful for me is that I exercise in the evening. A lot of people I talk to prefer to do it in the mornings. They want to wake up in the morning. It's the first thing they do, or one of the first things they do. But me, with having younger kids, my mornings are consumed with childcare related items. And I shifted so that I do my exercising now at night. Uh, and it wipes the slate clean for me.
Wow.
If I'm on my Peloton bike, shout out to Peloton, love it. If I'm on the Peloton bike, if I'm doing a yoga class, I do everything at home. If I do a yoga class, whatever I'm doing, I'm thinking about that. Nothing else is getting in. It wipes the slate clean for the day, and I feel just so relieved afterwards. I think relief is the right word
The
there.
right word. It's at the
Yeah.
end of the day, but it's still your priority. It's almost like your reward at the end of the day, I suspect.
Mhm. Yes. And then I have a little routine afterwards where I make a cup of herbal tea and I get sit on the couch and I do my little fuzzy socks that are cozy. And yes, I do it even in the summertime. I gotta have the fuzzy socks with the tea, and just wind down. Having that space in the evenings helps. The key there is to then not look at your phone and get tied up in email again on your phone, because that'll get me all wired again into work mode. But if I'm able to, put the phone down and just do my exercise, tea, and fuzzy socks routine, it is great. I sleep better at night.
Sleep
I
better at night, ready to face another day.
I definitely noticed a difference with my sleep once I started exercising in the evening. That's me. I know uh, it doesn't work out that way for everybody. And I have to say, like, my kids really respect that time as well. When I
And
when
you're
I
modeling something wonderful for them. They note that mom is doing this and that it's a priority, and perhaps that's something they'll incorporate into their lives as well. We've talked a lot about growing and changing. I always think of the way we lead our lives. We live our lives in seasons. There's something that you do for a while, and then there's something different that you do. What is your next season? What's next for you?
I'm in a transitional phase right now. I think we've chatted a little bit about this, right? And to be, candid with your listeners here, I am working through my transition into being a single parent and divorced woman. Uh,
The new landscape.
yes.
Mm.
And I've had almost 2 years now, right, in this transition period, trying to figure out what it is um, that I do want, right, for this, whatever the next phase is going to be. But figuring out how I like to spend my own time now that I have more alone time. And it hasn't been the easiest process over the last couple of years, but day by day, figuring out what I actually like to do and how I want to enjoy my own company.
And you have to enjoy your own company, certainly before you can enjoy someone else's, right?
Yeah. And we had also chatted about this before, uh, getting a clearer view into who I am if I'm not a primary caregiver.
Mm.
And a really big part of this transition for me. And that's why I'm not there yet. That's why it's like difficult for me to say, well, what's this next phase? What's the next season for me?
Yeah, if this phase is
Uh,
all about figuring out your new identity, then that's where you are. That's just where you need to be for now, isn't it? Just
yeah,
figure out who Amy is.
yes. And curious about what that looks like. Curiosity, learning.
And there's that again, being a lifelong learner. That is definitely something I know about you. You will never stop learning and teaching others. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like I've learned a lot from you. And I think our listeners have today as well, and perhaps more about you. As I said when we let off, I do think our listeners know who LRN is. I think now they know a little more who Amy is. And I'm so glad that you joined me today for this conversation. Thank you for your time. You told me just before we hit the record button that I was the only thing standing between you and a happy hour with your workmates. Go have some fun before you go home and have your herbal tea.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Amy.
Sarah.